In the previous screencast, I showed you how we can work with arrays that are external to VBA. In other words, arrays that are on the Excel spreadsheet. So in the previous example, we had just this array and we worked with adding 5 to it and also adding 5 and sort of offsetting the result down in these cells. So I want to show you now how we can create what we call local arrays, and that is they are local to the Visual Basic editor. So I've got a sub here. It's called create array. And now what we do to create for example, a 2 by 2 array here, we dim capital A with open and close parentheses, 2 comma 2. That means it has 2 rows and 2 columns. And I'll show you in a few minutes why that's actually not the case. It's really not a 2 by 2. It's really a 3 by 3 because there's a 0th row and a 0th column. But anyway, let's proceed, and I'll show you that in a minute. We can define elements of A11, that means the first row, first column. We can define that as 3. A12, that means row 1, column 2 is 5, and so on. So when I run through this using F8, now, so I ran that first line. I wanted to first show you what happens when we open up A. When you open up A down here, and by the way, when I dimmed A as integer, that means all of the elements of A, even though A is an array, it has all the elements are integer type. So you notice when I open up A, so there's a plus sign, we can open up that, and this corresponds to row 1 and row 2. So right now I've only defined the first position, the 1, 1, and so in the first row, in the first column, we have a 3. Now, as I alluded to earlier, a 2 by 2 defined in this way really is a 3 by 3 because there's automatically a 0th row and a 0th column. So I can open up the 0th row and there's also 3 elements there. So you notice I have all 3 rows open and there's one more, there's an extra column, so there's a 0th column. Now let me show you, a lot of times you don't want that. So I'm going to go ahead and stop that, and I'm going to add this statement called option base 1. Now when I run this, when I step through this, let's just go through all 4 of those values. I can open up A, and because I wrote that option base 1, now I really only have a 2 by 2. So there is no 0th row and 0th column of our array when I put this option base 1. You might run into a couple of scenarios where you want to use base 0, but for the most part you probably want to use option base 1. So that's how we can define the array. And let me just go ahead and change this. I'm just going to do something like we can message box A2 comma 2. So we've created this array. It stores all the values, and then you can do stuff with those different elements. So this would be the 2, 2 position of A. Now a lot of times you're going to want to import arrays from Excel. So we're going to import this selection as an array, and I'll show you that in a subsequent screencast. I wanted to show you one more thing in here is how you could prompt the user to input the elements of this 2 by 2 array. So what I've done here is I've dimmed I and J. We're going to have 2 indices of iteration. I have an outer for loop where we're iterating through the first and second rows. In each row, we're iterating through column 1 and 2, and this is just a 2 by 2 array. And then for each of those 4 elements of the 2 by 2 array, I'm setting I, comma J equals to input box, please enter element, and then we have I, comma J. And when we run this, then it comes up with the first one, please enter element 1, comma 1, so the user can put in a value. Then it asks for enter element 1, comma 2. So we can just put in values here. In this way, then, the user is defining the array instead of us setting it within the subroutine. So that's how you can create basic arrays that are local to VBA. So A here is a local array. In the next screencast, I'm going to show you how we can bring in selections and ranges from Excel and define them as new arrays that are local to VBA.